In my opinion, the key question is that there is non-exist doubt in this moment about the future of the euro. The future of the euro is clear for the people. The construction of the banking union is a guarantee for everybody, everywhere. This produces a feeling of more tranquility in the markets, more tranquility in the countries, and so on. And this is a good news. Another thing is the capacity to growth in Europe. That I believe that in this moment it will be limited. The economy is in process of to recover some degree of growth, but at very low levels. And there is not enough to produce, in my view, a very serious reaction in all the economies. With difference between among countries, the countries that have the possibility to make reforms, important reforms, and gain competitiveness and flexibility, the situation will be better than others. I believe this is indispensable because if you decide to create a single currency, you must to finish the building. If you decide to build a house, it is absurd not to finish the roof. It's necessary to finish the Eurozone. And finish the Eurozone means, in the first time, to create a banking union. The mechanism to resolution recently approved is a new step in this direction. But we needed more steps. We needed more steps. And we needed really that the Eurozone function as a monetary area integrated. When one financial system, now 17 financial system, that the value of the euro will be the same in Italy than in Germany, than in France, than in Spain, and it is indispensable. And more political integration among the members of the Eurozone. And then the other political question, very important, is to establish a very serious breaches between the members of the Eurozone and the members of the European Union that living out the Eurozone. Not exactly federal Europe. It is not necessary to arrive at a conception of federal conception in Europe. No? But I think, in my idea, I think that we needed a more integrated Eurozone and then more flexible no Eurozone, more flexibility in the European Union, maybe with more capacities and competences for national parliaments, for national governments in some areas that permit that some countries, as UK and other countries with some problems, living with more tranquil ambience in the European Union. No? If we establish this new relation of balance in Europe, and we modify treaties in this sense of more flexibility, I think the future of Europe in this sense will be more safe, more secure, and with more prosperity. But problems between the core and the periphery exist always in all the countries and maybe in the European Union. But first of all, I share the idea that if you are a member of a club, you must respect the rules of the club. And when the problems in some countries is that this means that these countries is not respect the rules of the club. And in my view, the two key rules in the euro are, in one hand, discipline, and on the other hand, flexibility. If you lose discipline, you have a problem. If you lose both, you have a disaster. And in some countries, for instance, in Spain, we lose both, and we receive a disaster. Another thing is the discussion about how it's possible to improve the situation and taking reforms and or how is in the level of the Eurozone, the responsibility of the Eurozone, and the responsibility of the countries. No? In my view, the second important rule is taking decision to put our house in order. Clean the house. And clean the house means to recover discipline, this competitiveness, make reforms, labor reforms, fiscal reforms, to be very serious and manage on budget and so on. But in parallel, we must build the Eurozone. But if not, it is absurd. We must build the Eurozone. In terms of exercise, political exercise, if you prefer in terms of power, there is a very serious difference in Europe today that in Europe 15 years ago or 10 years ago, that the power of German increased and increased. The situation of the European Union is more weak, and the crises that affect other countries to impede to establish some balances of powers in Europe. No? That means that the position of Germans is increasingly more important in Europe. This is, well, this is the reality. You can like or no, but this is the real situation in Europe in this moment. It's a real threat. I think is the most important threat in this moment in Europe. Traditionally, in our history, in European history, nationalism has been a catastrophe. Means a catastrophe. But the explosion of nationalism in different countries in this moment is a very serious question. And this is a threat for these countries, a threat for Europe. And it is a focus of potential conflicts in the future of Europe, seriously. For the people that create the European Union, or for my generation, for instance, we understand that the European Union means, in the beginning and historically, means peace and prosperity. Because the history of Europe is very controversial. There is a history with more conflicts than peace. Europeans wish seriously to have a period of prosperity after 2 world wars and so on. But for the young generations, they don't understand this because they're living always in peace. And they're living always more or less as well in prosperity. And now, in terms of in political terms, in economic terms, for them it's more complicated to understand what is the sense, historical sense of the European Union. If we must to explain these young generations, not only that the original objectives of the European Union is keeping in force in the present times, but the European Union is indispensable to guarantee not a new explosion of this integration in Europe and to working in some way in the global reality. If not, we have a lot of very serious problems. Working 28 countries sitting around a table and manage taking decisions is complicated. But if you imagine 100 regions, it is totally impossible. It is only a chance of conflict. And no, I am very serious concern about this situation. And we must to reestablish the capacity to demonstration of coexistence in the nation states and our commitment with the European Union in the future. The more important question in this moment is how happened the decision of the UK. But I personally share the idea that that for Europe is better to have UK inside the European Union, and maybe for UK as well. But I always consider that all the economic crises are political crises, and finally we must resolve political questions, because in one part there is nationalism, in another part is radicalism, and the expression of Europe is in my view, too weak. I am totally supporter of this idea because I cannot explain my country without the Atlantic. Spain is an expression of the Atlantic policies. And our history is an expression of a contribution in Atlantic terms, especially. But I cannot explain Europe without the Atlantic. I cannot explain the existence of the European Union without the Atlantic. And that means there is essential relationship between Europe and the US, North America, even Canada in this moment. Not only in political terms, but in terms of security and economically. If you look in the level of investments, of trade, or between Europe and the US is very impressive. Together with some the 50% of the GDP in the world. Well, now we have ahead us a very serious decision. It is the TTPI, the free trade area between Europe and US. I consider that it is strategically totally indispensable. And the current situation that you can look in this moment about the energy, about the situation of Russia, about the evolution in the Middle East, about the vision of China and other Asian powers, it is reinforced more this idea in my view. No? And then we must try to redefine the Atlantic policy. We should ask, it is enough in this moment to base our policy on the relations in the North Atlantic? You must to look in as well the South Atlantic and look in some countries in Latin America, look in some countries in Africa, look in the Atlantic as a basin, and trying to enlarge this combination of values and political and economic, cultural interest that we share. I consider that for the future, the United States will continue to be decisive in the Atlantic. Obviously, you look in the Pacific in economic terms and political terms, the presence of China, of India, 3,000 million people, changed the situation. Some people thinking, no, only the history, the future is inevitable, exists only in the Pacific. It is not true, because the Atlantic Basin is the area with more reserves of oil, gas, raw materials, food, and natural water, and investments, and trade of goods and services, and cultural values. And this is the force of this area is very impressive. But for our way of life, for our system of values, this idea around the Atlantic, in my view, continue to be vital. Strategically so important, this idea, that this is the time for the statesmen and stateswomen, but to take very serious decisions, look in the future. In terms of security, in terms of the idea of NATO continue to be valid, but we must to transform this idea, keeping the umbrella in terms of security for a lot of countries, but with more flexibility. In this sense, I think it's indispensable that the Europeans make more contribution of defense, because it is the situation is really very sad. It's better to spend budget in social questions as in defense. But people must to remember as well that defense is vital to keep in social welfare. After the Second World War, it's the traditional position in Europe that to be a complement of the US. No? But the problem is one day you open the door and there is no the US. And in this moment, how happened? In terms, it exists a threat of security about Europe. If I look in this moment, situation in Ukraine and Crimea, I personally share the idea that it's necessary to reinforce, not to escalate a crisis, but to reinforce defensive capacities in some countries in that around Russia and the center of Eastern Europe, because the position of Ukraine in this moment, I believe, is untenable in the future. And the pressure of Russia will continue. Russian policies said, I cannot accept that in an area that I consider an area under my influence, you put your hands. Okay, but if everyone defines the same policy, we have a problem. Because it is fundamental to respect the rules. Another policy, that is the Western Alliance, that said, I don't like problems. We don't like problems. But obviously, Russians take note of this possibility. Koreans take note. Iranians take notes. Venezuelans take notes. Cubans take note. And this is a bad situation, very bad situation. In politics, the expression of a very serious policy, of a very serious will, prevail if you not establish, well, a very articulate policies to avoid more problems with the people that don't respect the rules. I believe that at this moment in a lot of countries the situation is a very serious disconcert. For instance, this administration, there is not a lot of interest in Europe, to desperation of Europeans, because Europeans are in general extremely favorable in the beginning of this administration. But the absence of this administration in the Middle East is a problem. Disconcert and the lack of trust. One thing is redefined policies. Another thing is the absence of leadership. And the only country in this moment in the world with some capacity to establish some order in the world continue to be the US with his allies. If not, we find more and more and more and more problems in the future. We were in the way to recover competitiveness, to recover some part of the ground that we lost in the crisis, but we needed more time. And I hope that the government taking more decisions in terms of more capacity to stimulate growth and to create jobs and to make reforms and to taking advantage of the opportunity that generates as well the crisis to changes a lot of things in the Spanish economy and improving the opportunities for the people. Politics means, in economic terms, to create opportunities for the people. To be more precise, to create jobs, but to create opportunities and to promote and reinforce a vital society. But we needed political tranquility. We have majority in this moment. We have problems with separatism in Spain. The majority of the country is against this possibility of secessionism. We must continue to reinforce our unity, our nation, to recognize the plurality in the nation, but to respect the rules essential of our constitutional system. My experience in government is, in this sense, a good experience. Created almost 6 million jobs, new jobs, in 8 years. With the transformation of the country is very impressive. But you imagine that almost the 50% of the jobs that exist in the people is created during 8 years. What the transformation in my country is the mentality of the people changing totally. And the optimism in the country to say people, we are capable to do a lot of things, and that we are a place in the table with the people that decide the important things in the world. This is another mentality. And this is the question that we must recover. In economic sense, we are more optimistic. Politically, the concerns are serious. This is the responsibility of the national governments, but that as well is the responsibility as well of the European Central Bank. The different intervention of the European Central Bank and Mr. Draghi, in my view, have been extremely correct and decisive. And the idea that there can be some kind of intervention in the European Central Bank to avoid or to stimulate growth or to avoid a situation more or less of deflation will be better more quickly. Indebtedness, public and private, continue to be important in Spain. But the capacity to attract new investments in the country is very strong in this moment. But we must continue to reestablish discipline in public life and to descend the level of indebtedness in private sector. And we needed time. We needed to combine these questions with the decisions of the European Central Bank. This is one of the questions, because if you combine deflation with indebtedness, a very serious concern. I think the major risk is to establish a very strong policy, national policy, that continue the history of success. That means the last 30 years in Spain until 2004. And that transform the possibilities in the future of the existence of the Spanish people. It's not economic, it's political. But you combine secessionism in one hand and unemployment in other hand, especially for the young people. This is one of the reasons because we must move in very quick in this. The combination of different problems, unemployment or problems relating in some countries about immigration, of the taking some decisions that limit extension of the welfare states, can establish some problems now that can be used for the extremisms. And this is a worse situation. I think the banks are in a much better situation. But we must recover the normalization of the credit for companies, for families, and for people in general. But this is the normal activity of the banks. Yeah. This is activity normal in the banks. But this is will be a consequence of the more stability in the economy and the decision of the European Central Bank and the evolution of the Eurozone. The capacity of the country to demonstrate that trust in the future of to demonstrate that there is a lot of opportunities in the country in this moment to foreign investments. It's very impressive. Personally, I think yes. But this is two questions. One is capabilities. That is important. And other is intention. I think the intentions of Iranian regime is to become a nuclear power. Second, they building capabilities to become a nuclear power. I think the important is not exactly the date. The important is the intention. For this reason, all process of negotiations with Iran are complicated. Are very serious, complicated. For the record, the Iranian regime has demonstrated that the will to respect some agreements is limited. Economic sanctions against Iran is working very well. And if Iran reacts, it's a consequence of these economic sanctions. I think the regime change in Iran was the right solution. But in this moment, politics is in another way. We had created 4 years ago this organization, Friend of Israel Initiative. I am very proud to be the president of this initiative. The characteristic of this initiative is the major part of the majority of the people that is a member of the initiative is not Jewish people, beginning for me, okay. But express the idea that the future of Israel is our future, that Israel is our Western country, it's a democracy. Israel has the right to exist, to live in peace, and we're trying to avoid all the temptations of the policies to trying to delegitimize the existence of Israel, or to eliminate the existence of Israel, or to isolate Israel. And I defend for Israel the same that we defend in our democracies. The right to live in peace, to build prosperous democracies, and to not live under the threats, under rockets, under missiles, under problems every day in terms of these threats. Or the people that say with continuity, we wish to eliminate, to wipe out the map to Israel. No? This is the sense of the initiative in public activities and private activities. We are celebrated our annual meeting in Israel, and it's extremely important because we have a global vision of the different problems about Middle East, about Iran, about the negotiation with Palestinians, and about the new situations, these tectonic changes that exist in this moment in this region in the Middle East. We can exist partial agreements or interim agreements, but I personally consider that there is not exist possibility for a peace agreement without a recognition to the right to exist to Israel. If Israel would decide to recognize a Palestinian state, and the Palestinian side not recognize the existence of Israel, it is impossible to do a peace agreement. Totally impossible. I cannot imagine that signing a peace agreement with a people that not recognize my right to exist. This is absurd. Interim agreements will be possible. It is very clear here. The will of Israel is to recognize a Palestinian state, to recognize a lot of things in favor of Palestinians, to continue to promote prosperity in, for instance, in the West Bank. More problematic is the question in Gaza. This is an expression of division in the Palestinian side. I wish the best for the Palestinian people, but the right to the recognition, to right to exist for the state of Israel is totally basic. Without this, will be very, very difficult. Trying to explain this is important. No? I don't know, the relations between the European Union and Israel is very close. The relation between NATO and Israel is very close. But then the capacity or the will for some people to defend publicly some positions is very weak. but the important is finally is in the facts. And I believe that this question is an essential question. No? The right to exist, to live in peace, and to live in very peaceful coexistence with the neighbors and building together in the democratic systems and prosperity. I just spend one part of my time in this project. Because I consider that one part of, very important part of our future is in Israel. And I have moral obligation and political obligation to defend a democracy that every day must demonstrate that his capacity, its capability to exist under threat. And this is, in my view, for me as Democrat, a democratic politician, is a former politician, is a moral obligation and a political devotion.